Cars crowded together like a river of headlights on Fifth Avenue as the night slid down the shop windows. On the other side of the tinted glass, Richard's reflection returned to him the same precise and expensive expression, a razor cut that made his assistants straighten their posture. The driver parked the SUV in front of the hotel, and the marquee shone like a constellation of golden lamps. Red carpet, photographers, stiff laughs. The Swiss watch on his wrist marked 7:58 p.m. 2 minutes before entering the Horizon Foundation Gala Hall and giving the speech that would inaugurate his new initiative, a fund to support promising talent and social innovation. He repeated in his mind the slogan his marketing team had polished like a diamond: "Wealth is responsibility." As soon as the door opened, the cold street air touched his skin with a shiver. And along with the wind came a thin, insistent melody that seemed to tap lightly on his ear, like fine rain. Richard hesitated, annoyed at hesitating. He turned his head. Near the service entrance, under the shadow of a scaffold, a boy leaned his back against an iron pillar and held a worn guitar as if it were a wounded animal that couldn't be released. He was small, or maybe his thinness shrank the world around him, and he wore a faded cap with an embroidered star, the brim pulled down to cover his eyes. His fingers picked out a simple pattern, but there was a pulse there, an intention that didn't match the frayed coat. A paper cup on the ground, with coins that barely made a sound. Vanessa, the communications director, noticed her boss's gaze and approached with a smile that hid warnings. "Ignore it, Richard. It's New York. There's always someone singing in the wrong corner." He didn't answer. In another time, that cord might have pulled a memory: the keyboard in the parents' basement, the smell of mildew, the neighbors banging on the wall. But that time was locked in a room he preferred not to open. A group of guests stepped out of a limousine, and one of them, an investment partner, pointed to the boy with his chin. "Look, the soundtrack of our generosity." Contained laughter. Richard felt an unease, a sort of moral dandruff on the collar of his soul, and for some reason he left the red carpet and walked toward the scaffold. The boy, distracted, didn't notice. When he saw the Italian shoes stop in front of him, he broke off the cord and lifted the brim of his cap. His eyes were a grayish blue that resembled cold water. I'll stop if it's bothering you, sir," he said. "What's your name?" Richard asked, voice neutral as a boardroom. "Liam." "Liam what?" Liam bit his lip. "Just Liam." Richard leaned closer. "Why are you playing? You know this audience, don't you? It's not yours." Liam's hand tightened on the guitar's neck. "I play because it's what I have. Sometimes people like it. Sometimes they leave coins." His eyes drifted to the paper cup. The guests stopped discreetly, curious about the little theater of power unfolding. Vanessa stepped half a pace forward, ready to manage the risk. The investment partner laughed loud enough. "Hey, Richard, make him sing your favorite song. Pay the kid to entertain us, at least it'll make a funny post." A chorus of encouragement followed, that kind of laughter aimed at no one and everyone at once. The pressure of their stares worked like a finger pushing Richard into the role he knew best, the man who sets the tone. And he, in a reflex of contradiction against that moral discomfort he didn't want to acknowledge, let irony dress itself as charity. How much to sing, Liam? The question was simple and brutal. The boy's eyes widened. I don't know, whatever you think. $20 for one song? That's good pay for 2 minutes. Vanessa tried to intervene, Richard, but it was too late. The guitar stirred in Liam's hands like a racing heart. A handful of cell phones appeared, the world as one shop window facing another. Sing something pop. Something everyone knows, Richard said dryly. It was like putting the boy on a circus platform. Liam nodded, his throat swallowing hard. He picked the 4-chord pattern that holds up half the songs on the radio. Trembling hands. He opened his mouth and, in a threatened voice, went into the first verse of a song everyone knew, the sound barely coming out, pushed by shyness and cold. A couple passed by without looking. The guests exchanged that lazy kind of compassion you give with your eyebrows. Richard crossed his arms, impatient. Louder. You're selling a product, kid. The word product cut like a blade. Something changed in Liam's face. He closed his eyes and sighed, like someone about to dive into dark water. When he opened them again, the voice was different. It came whole, warm and rough in the right places. Suddenly, the melody that had been a sketch caught fire. The notes found a path among the marquee's lamps and climbed as if they had legs. The street stopped a little, just enough to notice. People turned their heads. The doorman hesitated. Vanessa lifted her chin, touched by genuine surprise. Richard felt an involuntary discomfort, as if someone had opened a window in the office and let in too much wind. Liam drew the chorus with confidence, and something hard to describe happened. The song fell naked into the chest of whoever listened, without polish. There was in that boy a pain polished by need, a determination that made the word product feel like a tight shoe. When he finished, the silence lasted half a second, a pause as full as a vault. Then came the applause, spontaneous, not for the $20, but because something had to be applauded in that city where almost nothing surprises. The investment partner smiled wide, delighted by his own cynicism now posing as sensitivity. The kid can sing, huh? And he threw $50 into the cup. Others followed. Coins turned into bills, bills into photos, smiles into posts. Richard extended the $20 bill, but his hand hung in the air because Liam didn't take it. Instead, he looked straight at him, the gaze of a boy who had seen too much. You said 2 minutes, sir. I did it. But I'm not a product. His voice had no anger, only a plain certainty. Richard forced the money into the cup and turned toward the door. We're late, he said. Vanessa followed but looked back once more, with a spark in her eyes that was a question. What will you do with this? Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers spilled light like clear wine. Richard walked down the carpeted corridor to the stage. The speech, which should have come out like a recited chant, stalled at the beginning, in an invisible spot. He looked at the teleprompter, read the words talent on the streets, invisible potential, and felt a dizziness of falsehood. The audience expected his useful charm, his needle smile. He delivered. Numbers. Goals. Partnerships. Words that dressed the guests like raincoats against any splash of conscience. He received calibrated applause and shook hands with donors holding champagne glasses balanced by calculation. But in the corner of his mind, like an off-key note that insists, came Liam's gaze again. When the orchestra launched into an elegant standard, Richard stepped away to a balcony. The city outside looked like a score of lights. He pulled from memory a keyboard stored in a childhood basement and the sound of a mother singing softly while washing dishes. The balcony door opened. Vanessa appeared with 2 glasses. I know that look. It's when something gets to you and you pretend it didn't. Richard smiled faintly. The kid's got a voice. He's got a story too, I bet. You tossed a coin into a mine and it answered with gold. He's just a street kid, Van. Yeah. And you used to be just a suburban kid who wanted to play piano and got called to the basketball court because music won't pay the bills. Remember? He didn't like being read so precisely. Our business isn't adopting individual causes. It's changing systems. Sometimes a face changes more than a system in an ad, she replied, half cynical, half hopeful. And sometimes a face changes a system without meaning to. You going to talk to him? Now. I've got 15 people to greet and a charity auction to perform. Vanessa bit her lip and disappeared. In the lobby, Liam's guitar was gone. The scaffold stood empty, as if a dream had packed up its things. The next morning, the algorithm brought him what he hadn't searched for. In his feed, a video, millionaire makes boys sing for $20 and gets unexpected response. The thumbnail, him frozen, bill in the air, the boy's cold water eyes, was a silent accusation. He clicked. The phone audio was poor, but Liam's timbre cut through like lightning. The comments split between outrage and awe. Why humiliate him? Who is this boy? Where can we find him? I'd pay for a full show. There were defenders too, he gave him money. As if money were a vaccine against cruelty. Next to the computer, a folded newspaper carried a headline he preferred to forget: eviction protests rise in low-income neighborhoods. The story mentioned, among many, a real estate fund whose public face was his own. Richard closed the paper, closed the browser, closed the office door. He was left alone with the question he didn't like: when did I start treating people like spreadsheet lines? On the corner of a market, Liam was counting coins with the care of a surgeon. He had slept leaning against a wall where the warm air vents from the subway blew a kind of dirty comfort. The backpack with everything he owned weighed on his back. The $20 had gone half to food, half to a night in the shelter, but the shelter had rules and eyes, and Liam preferred streets with familiar ghosts. His voice, this friend that never left him, was what kept him whole. He sang to forget the queue of forms, the last time he saw his mother in a hospital hallway, and the day a man in a perfectly cut suit knocked on their apartment door with a paper that meant nothing in the language of someone losing their home. He was walking, the guitar bumping lightly against his legs, when he heard his own name spoken correctly. Liam. He turned. Vanessa was there, without a badge, without event armor, wearing a wool coat and attentive eyes. Hi. I work with the man from yesterday. I didn't come to charge anything. I came to ask if you'd like to sing again. But this time somewhere you'll be heard completely. Liam stiffened. Trust is a luxury you can't buy with money. What for? So you can make a video and get likes? So you can get a chance. Not a handout. A chance. She took a breath. There's an open audition next week for a TV show, one of those talent programs. I can get your name on the list, nothing guaranteed, but it's better than going on stage through the back door. Anne, I can take you to a studio today. I know a decent producer. No promises. Just sound. Liam looked down. The word studio was beautiful, like a store window on Christmas Eve. I don't have clothes. Vanessa smiled, but not in a way that laughs at the problem. I have a card, and I like boys who have a future. We can fix clothes. What I can't give is will. That's yours. He thought of his mother, who used to say that willpower was the only engine that didn't need gas. He nodded. Okay. The studio was in an old building some hipster had restored with exposed brick. The producer, a gray-haired man in a baseball cap, listened without interrupting. Liam sang in front of the microphone, and the room became quieter than a church. When he finished, the producer slowly removed his headphones. We've got a problem, he said. Vanessa braced for the blow. He's too good. And that scares people who don't like to be caught off guard. He smiled. But surprise is what changes life. In the control room, a piano key mounted on the wall caught Liam's attention. He touched it shyly. A dry sound. I like the chorus that comes in like a window, he said, talking about someone else's song, and, without realizing, talking about his own life. At the office, Richard chewed on his contradiction like someone crunching ice. He had told himself he wouldn't go after the boy, but he'd send a driver to circle the hotel block for 2 hours the night before. Nothing. Then Vanessa texted him, I took Liam to the studio. He's real. Richard replied good, but stared at the word like a lit match near a can of gasoline. That night, alone, he went down to the basement of his house, a mansion of stone and glass in Tribeca that looked like a showcase of himself. In the basement, he kept things that didn't align with the minimalist aesthetic of the living room. There was one forbidden thing, a digital piano covered by a sheet. When he pulled off the cloth, the dust rose in small clouds. He sat down, stretched his fingers, and a timid scale came out, followed by another. One major chord, one minor. The sound brought back the memory of an older brother, Gabe, who used to drum on the table, and of how they'd grown apart when Richard chose the path of money and Gabe chose the path of bars filled with people who needed to sing as much as they needed to breathe. Gabe had died young, a motorcycle accident, an absence Richard had gotten used to not touching. Now, the repeated notes seemed to spell a name that never tired. The next morning, Vanessa announced, I got the audition. Wednesday. And yes, Richard, before you ask, it's not marketing. It's just something I wanted to do since I heard that voice. He nodded, feeling strange with himself for not having started the conversation. I'll go, he said, and the words sounded like a commitment to a ghost. On the day of the audition, the theater was a hive of dreams. People warming up their voices in the corridors, hairstyled, shiny clothes, and hungry eyes. Liam, in a simple but clean jacket and new sneakers, held his guitar like the rope of a boat. Vanessa adjusted his collar, a gesture almost maternal. "Breathe. The camera doesn't bite." He laughed, a little. "The camera doesn't, but people sometimes do." Richard arrived discreetly, without entourage, as if being seen there were forbidden. He sat in the back rows. When lights turned toward the judges making scripted jokes, he felt ashamed of himself, not for being there, but for having been the man under the marquee. He wanted to get up and find Liam before he went on stage, but he stayed. There's a right place in the story for each gesture, he'd learned at the cost of much damage. On stage, Liam entered the way those without their own door do, through the same rectangle of light as everyone else. The host asked quick questions with charisma that jingled like a keychain. Name? Liam. Age? Almost 15. What are you going to sing? A song I wrote. Murmurs in the audience. The judges exchanged skeptical looks. An original song from a boy was a high bet. What's the song about? About seeing stars even when you're cold. Gentle laughter, not mockery, tenderness. He began slowly, just guitar and voice. The lyrics, simple, spoke of 3 floors, the ground, where knees scraped, the rooftop, where he and his mother searched for satellites as if they were angels, and the sky, where all the things that hurt dissolve without asking permission. In the chorus, the melody leapt higher than seemed possible for his body, and the whole theater held its breath. Many people saw their own lives reflected there without realizing it. One judge put a hand to his eyes, another pressed his lips. When he reached the last verse, Liam's voice cracked for a second, not from lack of skill but from excess of truth. The audience finished the chorus for him. The rest was inevitable, standing ovation, long applause. They cut to a backstage interview. A reporter with a fuzzy microphone. "Who are you, Liam?" off stage. He hesitated. "Someone who wants a place to sleep without dreaming of noise." "And why that song?" "Because my mom used to say that when you don't have a roof, the only thing that covers you is the sky. And sometimes, the sky sings back." In the car ride home, Vanessa cried quietly, the way strong people do. Richard looked out the window. "Congratulations," he said to Liam without turning. "You don't need $20 to sing anymore." The boy gave him a sideways glance, skeptical and lighter at once. "I never needed $20 to sing. I needed $20 to eat." The silence that followed was useful, a room for thinking. In the following days, the audition video exploded. Millions of views. Invitations. A major producer offered a contract. Vanessa kept watch like an obstinate shepherd. Richard maintained a distance that was a tightrope. He didn't want to seem like he was buying a destiny, but he couldn't pretend he had no responsibility. That's when the audit landed on his desk. At the committee meeting, the legal vice president opened a folder. "We have an exposure risk." The word risk was the only one capable of bending a man like Richard. She pulled out a document. 2 years ago, one of our real estate vehicles acquired a building in Queens. We initiated eviction proceedings against delinquent tenants. Among the names, there's a woman and a minor, last name Carter. The minor is Liam. The room shrank. A buzzing at the back of his neck. Richard grabbed the paper. the court seal, the cold type of the order. And there, the signature proving what he wished were coincidence, his own name, Richard Collins, authorizing the legal motion. His hand trembled, imperceptibly to others. In the following days, that information, which should have stayed in the room, followed the capillary path of leaks. An activist blog, then a newspaper. The narrative was perfect for the scandal cycle. Man who humiliated boy is the same one who evicted him from his home. The world has an appetite for irony. Richard, who knew the mechanics of digital storms, did what he always did, called communications, drafted a statement. But the text, trying to stack context upon context, collapsed under its own weight. Liam saw the story on a borrowed phone at the studio. His face in the audition video beside Richard's signature. Vanessa turned off the screen. Don't look at that anymore today. But he'd already seen enough. Was it you who kicked me out of my apartment? He asked. The question wasn't an accusation, it was a shot in the dark. Not me, said Vanessa, honestly. But his name's on the paper. Liam looked at the instrument. The guitar suddenly seemed the only place without lies. I'm going to talk to him, he said. They met in a glass conference room at company headquarters, too high, too far from the ground. Liam entered with the same posture as when he entered the stage through that rectangle of light. Richard stood up. Liam. The boy faced the man who, at the start of the story, had dropped $20 into his cup. That paper has your name. Richard didn't try to dodge. It does. And I signed it thinking it was just another document among many. I didn't see your name. I saw numbers. He breathed. And that's how I went wrong. Liam bit his cheek. My mom got sick soon after. We couldn't find another place. We slept on a neighbor's couch, then in a church. I learned to sing hungry. I don't know how to explain it. Richard felt the ground shift, a kind of emotional earthquake that doesn't shake buildings but knocks down facades. I'm sorry, he said, words as insufficient as a bucket in a fire. I don't want your I'm sorry, Liam replied, without rudeness. I want no one else to have to learn to sing hungry. The boy, with his clarity, gave him a plank to cross. Richard nodded. Okay. And that word was different from all he'd said before. We'll fix what I can. Wherever I have a voice, I'll use it. And if I have to lose money, I'll lose it. Vanessa, in the corner, stayed silent so as not to break the gravity of the moment. The next day, the company announced a radical revision of its eviction policy and a transitional housing fund. It wasn't pretty. Investors resisted. Marcus, an aggressive partner, slammed the table. You're burning ROI over a sob story that touched your liver. Richard held his gaze. I'm investing in the future. Our business is also reputation and sleeping at night. The board hissed. He was willing to be deposed if necessary. Sometimes the great turning point requires falling in order to rise differently. Liam, in turn, was facing another lottery, the contract. The producer was in a hurry, wanting the boy to record a single with a 4-syllable chorus and a feature from someone who sang about cars and diamonds. It'll get you on the radio, he said. But Vanessa brought in a man with big hands and the manners of a grandfather, a music lawyer who spoke about rights the way people talk about grandchildren. Read slowly. Listen with your eyes. Liam, who wasn't used to reading contracts, learned to ask questions. And if I want to record my song about stars? The producer made a condescending gesture. After the hit. The lawyer cleared his throat. Sometimes the hit is precisely the song no one expects. Liam ran a hand over his cap. I know which song I want to record. And I know with whom. He turned to Richard, who had come just to quietly offer support. Do you play piano? Richard swallowed. A little. A little enough? Liam insisted. Vanessa smiled, as if seeing two lines that had always wanted to cross finally intersect. The producer rolled his eyes. Look, kids, that's not how it's done. This is an industry. The lawyer replied, industries are made and remade every day. In the studio, Richard sat at the piano like someone asking permission. Liam tested the microphone. The engineer adjusted the levels. The song being born didn't have the plastic shine of hits. It had breaths. It was pop, yes, because it embraced, but pop that remembered people instead of things. On the first take, Richard missed a note and made an apologetic gesture. Liam laughed. It's okay. My roof always had a crooked tile. They recorded until dawn, and at some point Richard realized he was playing for someone who wasn't there. He was playing for Gabe, who would have applauded by knocking his knuckles on the table. Liam, in turn, was singing for his mother, who would have pointed out satellites as if they were kites of light. The engineer gave a thumbs up. We've got it. And no one questioned that plural. Meanwhile, the public storm continued. The release of the song would be either a chance or a disaster. Vanessa designed a strategy: zero glamour, zero makeup for the truth. A concert in a public square, free access, no VIPs, and the housing fund announcement made not by Richard but by a community woman who knew the addresses of rooftops. You don't need to be the hero, Richard, she said. You just need to be human. He nodded, in surrender. On the day of the show, the sky seemed on their side. It didn't rain, but there floated a movie-like freshness. The stage set up in a Brooklyn square had discreet flags and a banner with Liam's name in clean letters. People of all kinds arrived. Curiosity is a transversal animal. Backstage, Richard fastened his nerves like a belt. You'll do great, he told Liam. And if I mess up? We'll mess up together. They looked at each other, a simple pact. The concert began with two familiar songs to warm up. Liam sang with a freedom TV hadn't captured. Children danced, erasing the chalk glyphs on the ground. On the third number, he called up a friend, and Richard walked in. A murmur spread. Phones lifted. The echo of scandal still hovered, some were ready to boo. Richard, in a blue shirt without a jacket, sat at the piano. Liam took the guitar. This is the song I wrote on the rooftop where my mom and I used to look for stars. I thought we could only see them, but today I think we can light some too, if we want to. If we mess up, fine. The sky isn't perfect. Look at that crooked tile up there. Laughter. The first note sounded. Richard kept the tempo with the delicacy of someone holding a sweating glass. Liam's voice entered on top, and the two things became one. The chorus came like a wave, and the square turned into a room, a family, a rooftop. People cried without shame. Someone's phone streamed it to an invisible crowd. Before the last chorus, Liam stopped and said, "This piano here is played by the man who made me sing for $20. But today he plays for a different price. Today he plays because we decided no one should have to sing hungry again." The square, for a second, didn't know how to react. Then, as in the best moments of life, it knew, it applauded. Not the man, not the boy, it applauded the fold of the world. When the music ended, the community woman came on stage and spoke about the housing fund called Veranda, a name invented the night before, and said apartments were already reserved. She showed the keys. "We're not writing love letters to eviction here," she said, drawing laughter. Then, in a gesture no one expected, Richard took the microphone, not with confidence but with humility, and apologized. Not a lawyer's apology. An apology that knew its place. "I signed too many papers without seeing people. I didn't see his name. I was wrong. And I'll try to err less and get it right with more people by my side." The square received it with a good silence. There was applause. There was criticism too, of course, but both sounds are part of the same song. The months that followed were like a film montage: Liam in the studio, Liam in music school, Liam receiving a letter with a fixed social security number, Liam in line at the DMV with Vanessa joking about his photo, Richard in front of a spreadsheet that now had names next to numbers, the board accepting changes like taking bitter medicine, markets creaking, the press watching, and the country in new conversations. Then came the night of the big show in Los Angeles, the album launch, the first album, titled Rooftops. The theater was packed. In the dressing room, Liam looked at his reflection in the mirror as if at a stranger who, for some reason, agreed to be a friend. Vanessa fixed the microphone on his shirt. "Ready? Never. Perfect. That's how you should go in." Richard appeared at the door. "May I?" Liam smiled. "Sit on the bench. When I call you, you come." He nodded, knowing his role was to wait. The show began with lights parceled into small halos. Liam entered, and instead of raising his arms like a star, he put his hand on his chest and breathed. "I wrote these songs on rooftops of buildings, on park benches, in helplines, and in silences I didn't know how to translate. Today I sing because someone listened to me. And I hope you listen to someone when you leave here." The audience responded with that murmur that's more than applause, it's agreement. Midway through the set, he stopped and called on stage a figure no one expected, a woman in a simple coat, hair in a tight bun, steady eyes, the director of the shelter where he had slept so many nights. He handed her an envelope with the first major donation from the fund, and the audience rose to its feet. "I sang Hungry," Liam said into the mic, "but now I want to sing with people." The show went on, and in the second to last number he called Richard. "When I said the camera doesn't bite, I lied," he joked. Laughter. Richard sat at the piano, and the two played the song about the stars. On the screen, images of rooftops from different cities, with people looking up. At the end, with no planned encore, no tricks, Liam returned and sang a cappella, no guitar, no microphone, nothing but voice. The room listened and fell silent. And when the last note died, the silence stayed a second longer than normal, long enough to become ritual. It was the best review he could get. Then came applause like the sea. Backstage, Richard leaned against the wall and laughed to himself, a laugh that was a polite cry. Vanessa came with 2 cups of water. You played it right. He brought me here. You brought yourself too. And a bunch of others. He shook his head, but deep down he knew the grace of life is when the numbers don't add up and the balance is human. Liam took off his cap, looked under it like looking into a secret world, and said, "Am I going to see the stars tonight?" "Yes," Richard replied. "But on a new rooftop." And indeed, that night, they climbed to the top of a building that now belonged to the E Veranda Fund. There was no party, just the wind. Vanessa sat on the ledge, laughing at some meme someone had sent, and a small group of people, the shelter woman, the big-handed lawyer, the producer who now said I was wrong when I almost said no, a street boy Liam had met who now had a bed, all looked at the sky of the city that never turns off its lights, not even to sleep. The stars fought with the pollution, as always. But that night, it seemed 1 or 2 had worked overtime. Richard, who didn't know how to pray, gave thanks, not to anyone specific, but to the idea that people can turn the right way when they remember the world isn't a blade, it's a hand. He thought of Gabe, and how he would have said, "About time you really played." Liam, lying on his back, whistled the refrain of the new song, and someone joined by tapping the rhythm on the parapet. The city sang quietly with them. The newspapers the next day brought beautiful photos. The comments came, thin in hate, and that was a miracle. Life, however, went on not as climax but as a routine of choices. Richard went to public hearings to defend laws limiting predatory evictions. He lost some battles, won others. Liam recorded a second single about a shooting star that didn't want to fall and a boy who taught the star to become a comet. Vanessa got job offers promising to turn causes into marketable products and laughed, accepting only those that didn't betray her voice. A year later, in a public school in Queens, Liam gave an auditorium concert under fluorescent light and plastic chairs, and it was the best show of the year, because the original rooftops were there. At the end, a boy raised his hand and asked, "How did you not stay angry?" Liam thought, grabbed his guitar, strummed 2 chords, and sang softly, "Anger that doesn't turn into music turns into stone. I just didn't want to carry more weight than my pocket." When he finished, he received a drawing, 2 people looking at the sky on a building without a roof. Underneath, it said, "Thank you for lighting up." Outside, Richard waited with his hands in his coat pockets. "I've got a meeting with investors at 4, he said, "but I wanted to stop by." Liam hugged him without hesitation. "You still play wrong sometimes," he joked. "I know," Richard replied. "I promise to keep messing up and trying again." And the two walked down the corridor smelling of disinfectant and childhood, like crossing a stage where the scenes never end. When winter returned, it brought with it the memory of the marquee, the night, the paper cup. Richard passed by the hotel alone and stopped in front of the scaffold, but now there was a banner, street music program, enrollment open. Next to it, a boy in a cap, not Liam, was strumming and singing softly. Richard left some dollars, but didn't throw them, he handed them directly to the boy. "What's your name?" "Ty." "Ty what?" He smiled. "Just Ty." Richard smiled too, leaning slightly so the bill wouldn't fly away. "Sing something of yours?" The boy hesitated, then began. The voice was uncertain, but the courage was big. Richard didn't correct the volume, didn't talk about products. He just listened. When the song ended, he clapped quietly and asked, "Sing another." The city outside made its usual noise, indifferent and enormous. And yet, for a few minutes, it was a rooftop. In spring, Liam climbed, not onto a stage, but up some random fire escape, to look down at the avenue. He no longer needed the rooftop as a home, he could choose it as a ritual. Beside him, Richard joined with 2 cups of hot chocolate. "You know, sometimes you can't see stars because of clouds, not because of the city," Liam said. "I know," Richard replied. "But even with clouds, we know they're there." He looked at the boy with a pride that wasn't his, it was borrowed from life. "You lit some, Liam." "We lit them. And we'll light more." They toasted with chocolate and laughed, 2 survivors of different stories who met in the same light. Life didn't become perfect. The housing fund faced lawsuits, haters, bureaucracy. Liam had days when his voice failed, and a critic wrote that maybe he'd just been a fad. He read it, cried, then sang anyway. The people who mattered were there. Vanessa sent a voice message, "Critics don't review stars. Stars shine." The lawyer sent a gif of dancing old men. The producer called, "Let's record that bridge we skipped." Richard thought of his brother and played piano in the dark. The world kept giving work, as always. And every time the temptation of indifference came with its logical arguments, they answered with music, and with papers signed on the right side. On his birthday, Liam blew out candles in a new kitchen, his own kitchen. There was no fancy cake, but there was laughter, and there were people. He made a wish he didn't tell. When everyone left, he climbed to the roof by the old fire escape and lay down. He looked at the sky the city barely gave him, and still found 2 or 3 stubborn stars blinking at him. He closed his eyes, and the voice that lived inside him, his mother's, all those nights he sang to not feel hunger, said, "Sing." He sang without audience, without streaming, without contract, without likes. He sang because it was what he had. And that night, it was enough.